looks like it's recording now. All right. Thanks for joining me, David.
It's a
Uh,
pleasure.
so you are in Atlanta, Georgia, right? And you've been there pretty much most of your life or in your entire life?
I've been here for the last 24 years, 25 years. So raised a family, started a business, started several businesses, and came here um, originally as a consultant after my MBA.
Yeah,
And because this is where the job was, I got my MBA in Dallas, Texas.
sure.
And yeah, and Atlanta been a great city. Gets you to any point in the world direct, and it's as I said, a great place to raise a family.
Yeah, it is a pain in the butt to drive through. I will tell you that. Every time I've taken a road trip, it's always Atlanta that you're always in the rushes and so on, and then you're stuck for like an hour.
Well, that's a good point. Anything in life, I mean, you try to design your life to be aerodynamic. So we live in a very particular, and once you know a city, you know when the patterns exist to be on the roads and when not to. And then you design your life around what needs to be done. So my wife is someone who also, works and contributes to the income in the family. And we're close to triangulating between close to her work. I built these companies working, from home and then being in a good school district for the girls kind of necessitated a particular area. And we still have our original home that we rent and this, the home that we've lived in, we just keep remodeling rather than anyway, that goes into some of our priorities about how we spend our money and who we're saving for and what we're designing together. But which is part of any good plan.
Yeah. So I've known you since probably 2018 or 2019, and at the back then I was at Benzinga, and you were probably one of my first few interviews back then, and we were talking about just kind of the way the whole trading world was changing, particularly on the retail side, idea generation. I mean, you were talking about AI and stuff back then before it was kind of like a big hot narrative, right, in the last couple of years, right? So you've been kind of ahead of the curve. But before we get into any of that, I would really like to kind of go back in time and understand kind of where you're coming from, right? So understand a little bit about kind of your heritage, growing up, school and early career. So do you want to maybe kind of take me back to kind of growing up? Where did you grow up? And I'll kind of go from there.
Sure. Well, I love how full circle we're getting here, right? From the
Yes.
first conversations we had to now, to now where we are here and using AI as a thread. But really, I mean, the most relevant parts of my story were that I identify with today that I still, carry with me is, I'm the son of an immigrant who moved from what was French, colonies in North Africa, but part of France before it started to gain their independence. And I'm that kind of ricochet immigrant. It's more than just to say the son of an immigrant. There was some trauma involved in having to leave a country that was, under revolution and kicking its, the colonists out, so to speak. And half the family went to France, the other half came to the US and settled in Long Island, New York. And there's a lot of trauma, in those movements that I wasn't necessarily exposed to, but that impacted my dad. My grandfather was an entrepreneur. My father was very much kind of the opposite of that. He built a career in the hospitality industry and a very rewarding career in the hospitality industry as an executive with many, different brands that we all know, Hilton and Embassy Suites and even Holiday Inn when it was, way back when. That that led to where we moved and why we moved as an adult. And when I fast forward to me, I've created I think I'm more connected to my grandfather in that entrepreneurial spirit. My grandfather was one of the first to introduce me to the stock market. And we used to pull out graph paper and actually graph X's and zeros, pivot charts that they're called now. And we pull out the day's paper, looking at yesterday's closing price. And you can imagine that kind of time cycle now to where we are, about real time and AI and so forth. But when we started Trade Ideas, that was my motivation for attaching myself to something, greater than me and, supportive of what my why was and what this journey was about. So the markets have always been something that I've had a fascination with. And my grandfather kind of stoked that, originally in me. And then, as I said, we started, Trade Ideas, which was all about idea generation and helping people make better decisions. Essentially, that was there's taglines, and then it's like, what's our purpose? And boy, did we collect some amazing stories about how people use the technology, and were using the technology to further their purpose in life, like either opening up a soccer academy for youth in certain cities, or you know, getting income in between seasonal work as a photographer and so forth. But when it season's over, like what do we do in between the next, gig and so forth? There was always the markets for these people, and we were able to, provide technology to help even the playing field and so forth. And yeah, we talked about AI back in even in 2017, but it had previous iterations, that have since gone to the wayside as the technology has progressed from this idea of being masters of big data and being able to handle, crunch enormous amounts of calculations, to getting smart about that data itself. Uh, and like anything, sometimes roads diverge and choices are made, and partnerships, come together to 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 move a company to one period, but they're not necessarily the ones that take it, to the next. And for differences and reasons, that are too long to explain here, I mean, it was time to make changes. In my journey within Trade Ideas, I'm still connected to it, but I'm out of its day-to-day operations because of the way in which really, technology confronts you to make certain choices. And I wanted to make certain, choices, and still do to this day in the areas where I believe the impact is going to, where the puck is going to go, versus, the decisions of others, and deciding, no, we think the puck is going to go here. And we see how it all plays out. But
Yeah.
that's that kind of that's a little bit of my story, but it's also, I bring up the origins about the immigrant story, because for myself, the way I've raised my children is to also connect to this rich heritage, cultural, French heritage, and um, having these plans and visions, and then executing on them, whether it's business or for my family. I have we revise these kind of 10-year, 5-year plans, but having them has yielded incredible, uh, what do I call it? Rich rewards, especially in my, in both domains, in business and in my family life, where my children now also embrace the advantages of being a citizen of two countries, and being, bilingual, and transferring to them, a certain level of language, and what that does in terms of options, capabilities, and skill.
No, I totally get it. And as you're talking, my sister actually lives in France now, Paris to be exact. And she loves it. She's sending me pictures every single day, she's enjoying it. But one thing, kind of going back to your, kind of family being immigrants here, how do you think that kind of changed? Because you talk a lot about, some of the trauma, right? The stuff, kind of coming to the US and everything. You would think, when you're saying those things that you would be kind of risk averse maybe, but it doesn't sound like, especially if you're entrepreneurial, you're more so risk seeking in a way. So, and you talked a little bit about your grandpa and so on. So, what was it kind of in your family, or who was it really that kind of sparked that in you? Was it kind of, multiple persons or whatever? And was it really markets kind of where this kind of fascination, passion for entrepreneurship started for you?
Well, again, I meant like it's this idea of a ricochet, of a rebound, or it seems to sometimes even skip a generation. My grandfather was an entrepreneur in, when it was France and North Africa, what is now Algeria. And he was a grossiste, he was a wholesaler to those who would go and sell wares at the market with the individual stalls and actually connect with customers. So he would sell everything. He was like a Walmart back then. For those who would go and create their own stand and sell, everything that they needed to. And the family lived above, this business. But it was seriously time for their lives at stake. Bombing, the natives were bombing, homes and businesses all along the street, and there was cash left in the register and inventory on the shelves when it was time to go. And that is traumatic. So you arrive, as my father did, like the age of about 15, 13, I think, 13. And it's a bit of a whipsaw. And then suddenly you're thrust into trying to be like the the parent even. You have parents who are trying to assimilate, but it's harder to learn a new language at that age, whereas children is much easier. But through it all, you start to, you're somewhat your childhood is impacted for sure. You don't get to play in the yard. You've got to like help meet the plumber who's coming over and fixing, the house that you've just bought. It's a lot. So my father was very much someone who is, although he's all changed because we're all aged, in certain ways, and he's very different than how he used to be. But when he was raising me, it was very 1 and 0. He was very mathematic and very accounting and very audit driven and very control in the sense of business processes. He brought it into this family too. And so he was very, I don't want to say risk averse, but he was very conservative, with his approach, and somewhat needed to be because that's what was required of him when he first got here, and it's what he needed to be able to do to survive and adapt and assimilate. Um, and so that I mean, I see that and respect that, but I also rebound from that a little bit, or ricochet, is my term, and say, hey, so that's my connection to my grandfather. And that's important because um, I'm someone who just has developed certain skills around how people connect and what we're all trying to do together. Um, can be very powerful when, and all my leadership examples and both at Trade Ideas and working with other entrepreneurs and building a community and conferences, have all been around this idea of what we can do together can be pretty, can make so much more of an impact if we're all aligned and we're on the same page and we're doing things, and like we get to look at each other and go, look what we did. I mean, and that to me is magic, and that's the contributions I make. In every endeavor is to try to say, well, how can we expand this impact? How can we involve others? And we're going places. Hop aboard and help us get, to that place.
Sure, I gotcha. It's interesting kind of how you talk about how it skips a generation because my grandpa was my family's from Croatia, but he very entrepreneurial. And then, they all run away from Croatia. They come to the US, and it's interesting how my dad was very much kind of conservative, just like how you kind of say or whatever. And then, you have your generation, you're kind of merging the best of both worlds, kind of in a way, where you kind of understand the one side of it, and then you have the other side of it kind of pushing you because thinking, there is more out there, right? And so on. But so you grow up, what did you end up going to school for? And out of school, what was the early career like?
Yeah. So uh, I went to, we were living in Dallas at the time. So in my book, you are from wherever you learned how to drive. And I was born in New York, but I learned how to drive in really two places. Um, and those two places were Dallas, and I also learned how to drive in France. So the but I graduated high school in Dallas and went to the University of Texas, which was an amazing place, still is. And my former partner kind of talks about like you go to school to learn about not just the books, but more importantly about the network that that you build. And so we first met there, and then we went our separate ways for several years, and then reunited, about almost 10 years later to post undergrad to start our entrepreneurial journey with Trade Ideas. And in that interim, I worked for various companies. I worked for Kraft Foods. I understood what it was like to carry the bag in sales, and I also got my Kraft was generous enough and seized the opportunities where I found it to have them pay for my MBA. So I went to MBA school at night, and then finished up, on my own, and then started a consulting career for about 4 years that took me to Atlanta. And yeah, it's all about the markets as well. There's an education market. I think I graduated when it was peak MBA, when valuations for MBAs were at their peak. And I won't say the year, but it was a fantastic transition for me. And being a consultant was an extension of my MBA. It was like learning models, understanding how to apply certain models and engage in people to move project management wise people from point A to point B. And that turned out to be pretty well skills that were needed in moving a startup from point A to point B, from milestone to milestone.
So tell me a little bit more about kind of the early days of trade ideas. What was kind of the problem that you were solving for? And yeah, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it started off as a simple kind of web, based tool, and it was just displaying data, interesting data. Um, and we started to make it evolve around this idea of how do we make this a functioning tool? How do we make this a tool that helps people make better decisions? And then we started, probing that even more. Like, well, better decisions in the service of what? Well, in the service of what people's goals are, well outside the markets. The markets you go into and you engage with because it's an incredibly liquid environment where you can make a decision. If you have an error, you can pull the money back out. It's not like making an investment in a company as a venture capitalist or buying even a home. Those are longer time frames, but the markets allow you to engage in a very productive way, um, in and out. Same thing with cryptocurrencies and such. So how do we make people's decisions in these, in these arenas, as good as institutions? And uh, that's how, Trade Ideas was born. And then we started to get enterprise endorsement, or larger companies endorsement of our technology, what we were doing, and got ourselves featured on their platforms as well, like E-Trade and Scottrade and Interactive Brokers and TD Ameritrade. And those proved to be the ways in which we'd leveraged the growth, the popularity, the awareness of the program to a larger trading, community that now individually kind of signs up and subscribes. And and there, and then going from just the individual decision making, a lot of my work today in the fintech community is about helping clients do the same path, scale and get to growth for the kinds of companies that range from those that are building indicators and tools to those that are actually also doing infrastructure around not just making a better decision, but making the execution of those decisions flow as smoothly through the system as possible. And there are amazing companies doing that work of really um, helping the infrastructure of everybody's participation in the markets work more smoothly.
Gotcha. What did it take, as the business evolved and you talked a lot about, kind of the partnerships that you had with some of these bigger brokerages and stuff like that. What did it take to, develop those partnerships, right? And get the voice out there about the product, right? How does that process even look like?
Yeah, it follows a clear, kind of consistent pattern of identifying in organizations, who's the champion, who often is the economic decision maker, who has the budget, control to say what this is what will be approved, this won't, and then understanding who can be a coach in that process, who can represent you and in their own self-interest within their organization to bring forth your idea and your solution. And so understanding who's a coach and who's a champion is pretty key. And then you focus on all of the data that you need in order to show the case of where, you know, the company growing or the company continuing this way will be at one state. And if you can show that your solution helps solve something, right? It makes a dollar go faster, or farther, if you will. You put in a dollar, you get, a dollar 10 back or some kind of return back. At scale, it becomes you go from pennies to something pretty significant. And we were helping at the time to help both commission generated, revenues generated from commission from trading to increase with engagement. And then after commissions went to zero, how do you still engage and retain these, customers with technology that keeps them in the markets and keeps them in the markets longer rather than just blowing themselves up, but in a way that is a better decision. So yeah.
Yeah. One thing that I find is interesting is, around the time I started at Benzinga, the hot narrative was commissions going to zero and being able to trade for free, and that was kind of like the value, right? And so um, then we had the pandemic. A lot of people rushed in. The barrier to entry is lower. People have, the money being sent to them, and maybe they're investing some of that, right? You had this huge craze, and um, then you kind of have like the social investing aspect, right? Following the pandemic, whether that was 2021 and on with those high flying stocks like GameStop and so on. And now, as the pandemic has passed, people have returned back to offices and so on. They've grown up in terms of investors and traders themselves, and their styles are evolving, and you're starting to see a lot of these brokerages, whether it's like the Robinhoods of the world, reposition, and adjust to that. So they're adding tools like, for retirement, spending, saving, right, beyond just investing, and as a way to kind of retain those people in their ecosystem. You have other platforms like Public, right, which kind of play into that social investing aspect, right? But the thing that I want to ask you is, as you know, as this business has kind of evolved, right? Where do you see? There's so many solutions out there. Like even at Benzinga, as I was doing all these interviews over the years, I would always talk to people who maybe they have a similar idea, but they all have kind of a different take, right? But at the beginning of this conversation, you talk a lot about like where the puck is going, right? So in your eyes, where do you think the puck is going in terms of, trading and then technology that kind of, enables that trading?
I think to answer your question, what most people are looking for is how does technology is always impacting people's financial journeys. And if we're talking about the markets, we're talking about how do people engage with the markets over time. In the past, you needed several different partners to do specialized and different things. There's been a congruence thanks to technology and thanks to AI to help elicit intentions and desires and reflect and guide people, that you'll see this convergence where Robinhood will start to act like Fidelity. Fidelity will want to start to act like Robinhood. You'll also see, you're already seeing the beginnings of 24-hour markets. It's crazy that equities don't, it's, I say crazy, but the equity markets get their influences from different places. Sometimes they lead in the innovation, but of late and most of our recent history has been lagging and following. So cryptocurrencies offer the signpost or guide for what equity markets will eventually do, and that is we've already got fractional trading of major major equities, and you'll have 24-hour trading is my point, as you do with cryptocurrencies, who have shown the way in terms of innovation in something that just the equity markets have to keep up with or risk um, or risk being not irrelevant, but a smaller part of what the overall effort is. I mean, there's already a huge phenomenon that there are less publicly traded companies in the markets, less issues than there were in the 90s by almost half, I think, where we are today. And then those names are just gotten bigger, and again, leading to fractionalization of those of trading those stocks. So there's always going to be innovation. I have the free plan.
All good.
We'll keep going. We'll keep
Yeah,
going.
we'll keep going. Sorry to interrupt your train of thought.
All good.
Yeah,
So I think I answered the question. I mean, we talked about this convergence, and we talked about how the markets are changing.
yeah,
If I had to wrap that answer up, it's about I enjoy my work and the plan that I have about helping teams now,
yeah.
answer the questions about how can we, how can I help teams and companies from my experience in helping individuals make better decisions? How can I have an even larger impact on how lots of these, how trading and trading services are both presented to individual traders, the individual uh, consumers of this technology, as well as the interoperability of these companies and the data to provide as an efficient market as possible.
Gotcha, gotcha. Later, I want to get into kind of some of the other projects that you're currently involved in, including kind of the wine stuff. But kind of moving on from trade ideas, talk a little bit about, kind of sticking with ideas. I mean, the big thing that is on my mind is like you did trade ideas for so long, and now you got a couple other projects, but how do you stick with those ideas for so long, especially today when we have this instant gratification, right? And we get our answers right away, whether it's with AI or whatever you're using, right? How do you stick with those ideas for so long? What helped you stick with those ideas?
Well, there, for all the change that happens, there is a universality about certain aspects of um, uh, about how you want to treat people and how you want people to experience your service. You can either be a chiropractor or you can be a fintech, but it does come down to a customer's experience. And every customer has a journey using your services, whether you're a chiropractor or whether you're a fintech service, or whether you're even the background operators of that, the enablement, technology. There's a great book and a mentor and a friend of mine named Joey Coleman, and he's written a book called Never Lose a Customer Again. And it is about how companies can map all the customer touch points that they have. And at every touch point, there's this opportunity to using, technology, both AI and social media or person one-on-one, good old-fashioned human communication to connect and and bring an experience to a customer so that they come back. Um, and it's not just transactional. Like I use this once and I'm done, but it's like I got an experience, therefore I want to come back and continue to have this experience. And lo and behold, it develops into a relationship. Um, one of the maxims that I started with Trade Ideas and I take with me to other clients is when you have this precious occasion, this privilege of being able to be in front of the customer to engage in an interaction, you'd better make sure that the first impression, the first time they do engage with you, they understand their journey all the way to, well beyond. You've got to make sure that you provide the maximum value on that first impression and that they see themselves using the value that they're getting on that first impression all the way through, they can see in an instant like flash forward, cut to where they're continuing this relationship because they see themselves repeating the value that they get. You've got all that to do on that first impression. Because if you wind up giving them the stick instead of the carrot, well, I've learned many lessons over the years that repeatedly hitting customers with a stick to say, before you can get to the value, you have to go through this hurdle and this hurdle and this hurdle. I talk about customer touch points, but you don't touch them so that you can delay them or you can just delay their gratification. We talk about instant gratification. You need to show all of that up front and on that you're the person and destination where they can find this value. And that's almost a universality, and say, oh, things are different here. I can see myself, making better decisions, or I can see that this technology helps me provide better service to my customers. Um, you've got to be able to show that pretty quickly, if not, right at the beginning,
Gotcha.
or or the way we operate now. You only you only have that one occasion to do it before
Sure.
someone scrolls up, scrolls over, and moves on to the next thing.
The is particularly, the early days of Trade Ideas, I'm assuming that it was very hands-on and it was just a few of you kind of working on this. But as time goes on and your team grows, how do you, were you comfortable with kind of focusing on what you're good at and delegating and allowing others to take on things that maybe they were more capable to, accomplish? Or how did you go about that? And then, in trying to grow Trade Ideas and kind of let go and allow things to grow.
Yeah, if I'm relating my story to someone else listening to this and where they're on their story, is that I would say that it's important that you surround yourself with the best people, the best ideas. And if you're not doing that, you've got to go out and seek and find that. Well, either if you're fortunate enough to have designed the team, that's on this particular project or in this company, great. For me, it was both that at times, and then it was also necessary for me to surround myself with other entrepreneurs, which I had the fortune of doing with an organization that's called the Entrepreneurs Organization. There's YPO and there are other organizations that provide this kind of peer-to-peer uh, relationship and access to those who are going through the same problems fundamentally, not necessarily the same industry, but the same problems of building out a team, motivating, setting goals, and marching to those goals and understanding the culture that you're creating at the same time, and helping people aside from what you pay them, helping people to attach themselves to an idea or goal greater than themselves, right? To show the impact of what's our why. We're helping people outside of the markets to do what they need to do in life, what their goals are, start a soccer academy or, supplement income or volunteer, to do all these things that they could be doing because of what we're helping them do. Once you understand that why, it starts to build, more motivation than just your own self-interest. That starts to breed a culture. And whether I've led, companies or whether I've led other CEOs, as I, was as a chapter president of this organization, this EO entrepreneurs organization here in Atlanta, it was all about, especially if I'm leading other CEOs, how do I get those, this organization was an all volunteer one. And yet it was 150 other CEOs of this Atlanta chapter that I had to engage with and provide our learning services, our social services, and there's a finance chair to pull all this together and strategic alliance partners to bring on board. So doing that was you have to create a theme, you have to create a culture, and you've got to be able to be consistent about it. You've got to be able to articulate it at any given moment to say, why are we doing what we're doing? So if I'm leading CEOs or if I'm leading other people on my team every morning, it usually happens like in between, the first cup of coffee or after brushing your teeth, you wake up. It's like everyone will go through a little internal dialogue of like, what's the most important thing I got to do today? And why am I doing what I'm doing? Well, for me, I needed to be able to say in a story-like way, we're doing this. We are helping people, enable make better decisions to get to their financial dreams in order to do what they need to do in life. Or if it was among these other CEOs, my theme for the year was a hero's journey. And how can we help other, the heroes within my company is the CEO is often the guide for a hero's journey. This all breaks down into the concept that Joseph Conrad wrote about. It's nothing new, but I used that framework of storytelling where every product tries to put you as the hero and the product is like the solution or the guide. Well, that's a very common way of marketing, services and products to people. I turned that into like, how can we build a team around this idea of we are the guides for these other, member CEOs of this organization and even other people within my team. And we're going to help them get to where they need to go.
Gotcha. As you were talking, one thing that kind of crossed my mind, and I actually had to Google it real quick because I was wondering what were the names. But have you ever heard of like the PayPal Mafia? And it's like all the kind of alumni, and they're all kind of built their own big technology ventures or whatever. But it's as you were kind of talking about having those ecosystems where you're a founder or you're a leader and you're kind of coming together. That's kind of what I thought about. It's being surrounded by those people who are doing things that you are, or trying to do great big things similar to how you are, right? And being surrounded by those people and helping each other. But that's something that came to mind. I just thought I'd mention that.
I want to correct. I mean, it's not about getting people to think like you. It's actually getting people who have different experiences than you so that you can both learn from them. And then they have the emotional and intelligent quotes. You want to surround yourself with the best kinds of people, because if you're the smartest one in the room, you're not really growing and you're not being challenged. And so the idea is to, goodness knows, I mean, when I was leading this group of other leaders, it was a huge, growth period for me and having the privilege to lead them is something that I take with me in everywhere else I go. It's just it really does come down to you are better if you're surrounding and if you're not, assess that, recognize that, go out and find the networks and people that you need to be. They could be mentors, they could be peers that are doing similar things to you, but have a different mix of luck and decisions and resources. You want to be around that because that's how you find opportunity, luck and preparation as you surround yourself with constantly a group of people that are going to keep you learning and growing. All this is I would say again for other people's journeys, you have to have the attitude of being I'm a lifelong learner, not someone like, hey, I got all the answers. If you're a lifelong student, if you're a lifelong learner, that's always been whether I took it as far as I could with my education, undergrad, and then MBA. And I started to plateau and thinking, I need something else. And I joined this other organization and there's, whether you're an entrepreneur or whether you're a CTO or whether there are organizations of other COOs, key, executives, CTOs. Find that peer group. There's the CMT for those interested in the markets. There's those communities, have sources of great leaders and inspiration that if you don't have access to, or you don't surround yourself with, it it's a you wind up second guessing yourself. It's a longer journey. You'll make more mistakes before you arrive at the same place that someone else has, who's willing to share the shortcut that they, here, do this, you'll get here quicker.
Gotcha. Is this kind of, having these ecosystems so on, is this something that kind of helped you maintain your passion for work and entrepreneurship, especially when kind of, when you have these passions start to turn into kind of full-time roles or gigs and so on, right? It turns into a job and it's not just a passion anymore. Is that kind of what helped you also kind of maintain that passion?
Yeah, we talked earlier before this conversation about how do you prevent a passion from becoming like, oh, the drudgery of a job and so forth. Well, you start to build a team, and that team starts to, comprise people who are best at what they do. And you kind of divide up so that you don't have to work on the areas of a particular business, that aren't playing to your strengths. Everyone, and I would rather be having everyone playing on their strengths rather than trying to shore up weaknesses. We can all work on being better people, and that's great. But if we're really focused on, you know, getting to a product market fit and scaling revenue, we got to do what we do well, and let people do that. And there's all kinds of people on a team, that work in a different way that if you identify and assess and identify, you work with. A lot of the leaders that I led, as another example, we organized initiatives around the kinds of people and the kinds of CEOs that people were. Like some people are more strategic, some people execute with more excellence. Some people are relators. They understand the connections and people and networks to bring people together in the right room. And then other people are, what's the fourth one? I forget, are communicators, right? So if you have a team full of communicators, everyone's just talking, no one's doing it. If you have a room of 5 people and they're all strategy people, no one's executing. But a mix of people who can execute with relators and those who can lay out strategic, initiatives, and then those who communicate them, all of that starts to become a functioning team. You get to work on the areas where, as if you're, if you're the leader or CEO, where you can think of the next step and or, apply yourself. But those dynamics don't come together unless you're not just leading from like, this is what's got to get done, but here's our mission, our purpose, and why we're doing what we're doing.
Gotcha. As we kind of move forward, I'd like to touch a little bit more on fintech, right? So we talked quite a bit about kind of, how trading has evolved, right? So you've got the cost to trade down, so barriers have decreased. You have easier access to information, whether that's on these platforms that you're trading or outside of them. And then you have product choice, which has increased, right? You have whether that's something like options, right, where the access to options has increased, the number of different expiries that you have, um, you know, a more efficient tool maybe to express your opinion, whether you're trying to hedge or you're trying to speculate. Like you have all these things to make trading more engaging, easier to do, and so on. But in your eyes, where do you see kind of like this intersection of trading and technology going forward, right? You talked about, especially when we were in 2019, you're talking about AI, right? It's still a hot topic right now. So really kind of where do you see this trading technology space kind of heading here in the next few years?
We had a mentor and friend of mine once talk about like you can do well in the markets if you just project yourself into the future 18 months, as little as 18 months from now and work backwards and then come up with, and he was very good about thinking about hypotheses and living in that future and kind of reporting back and saying, okay, this is where and who I see actually on that same path and so forth. Um, I say all that because AI is just going to get even more efficient at presenting ideas, at being able to do so in a way that starts to blur the what used to be strict lines about and I believe that the markets will have to figure this out in a little bit more detail, is to say when does it become a fiduciary responsibility of the technology? Like, we used to present our technology to say, look, we're not giving financial advice. We're simply presenting what's happening in the market, and you have to bring your own risk profile and attitudes toward the market in order to interpret the ideas we're giving and bring them into how you might make these decisions. We can give you a recipe for a great trade, which we often did, but like anything, if I give you a recipe, for lasagna, you're going to get and give it to 10 different people, you're going to get 10 different dishes. Like, I didn't have this and I added that, and I decided to make chocolate out of this, whatever it is. But the point is that, there's one recipe that can be 10 different results. I think AI is going to merge a little bit more of that to say, given what we know about your risk profile, this is more custom, version of what the idea that's being presented works for you in your case. Well, that's great. But I also think that the technology will also get into further than that. It will help with this future planning. It will help say, this is a future, this is a signpost. And now not just for trading, but for longer term investing, if you agree with this, what the AI might help, design wise, then you should be in these particular technologies doing these things. And you don't have to go too farther than seeing some of the footprints that, whether you like them or not politically, like Elon Musk and others have kind of done, to say, look, there's investments. Forget what they say. Just there's footsteps in the form of investments and capital at work in these areas of space and telecommunications and fuel and energy and climate change technology and so forth. So who's doing well or who's pushing the envelope in those areas? Those are areas that instead of just day trading, I'm making longer term investments in.
Gotcha. One thing that you kind of said that resonated quite a bit is like you can give someone the entire process, right? And maybe when it comes to trading, but they'll still come out with a different result. And at the end of the day, this is kind of what's kind of special about markets, right? If it was all computers and like there would be no market, right? If you didn't have like humans involved, right? Because you would just have, you'd find the equilibrium, that's it, right? So it introduces that noise and so on, right? And I can have your process, but I'll still potentially come out with a different result, right? So I thought that was interesting. But to kind of start closing this a little bit, I want to get into some of the other projects that you're working on. So I think there's two, right? You have Avid Vines and Ad Intro. Is it advertising intro?
Yeah, Adventro. Yep.
Intro.
And
So yeah, yeah.
yeah, so we talked about my French heritage and so forth, and my education both in France and my family that still live there, and the purpose-driven way I've raised children in order to be connected to that has necessitated lots of visits, lots of wonderful memories, and let me tell you, my children both know how to function, they know how to read the room, they know how to navigate themselves, and they can, and we've tested that with some hysterical stories that are too long to share here, but imagine being separated from your kids because a train left without you on that train and your kids left, and you're like, whoa. So we've had some of those we've had some of the, I'm talking about like clinging to the train and having to jump off before impending death and doom, ensues. Anyway, the, what were we talking about? Right. So yeah. So creating Avid Vines, which is a champagne import company, has been a dream realized, and one that I started several years ago, and I've given a lot of time and attention, and so it speaks lots. I mean, I fail every day with that business, but fail. It's not failure, because failure would mean you didn't learn the lesson. So Avid Vines has generated tons of lessons, and so its future is finally, actually, I can say, on a much better track than what it was before, because of various ways, and challenges. Like, I don't have as strong a team. I say that. I mean, I have built that to a point now that I have a very good team, but I put too much on myself, and that's not violated, previous rules that I had in, at Trade Ideas and in other, even in, leading the organizations that I led as with other entrepreneurs. So I had to be reminded of that and pull and invest back into a team to build the culture and build what we were doing. So it's still a process, and I continue to learn from it. But one of the most important lessons from there is, again, what I said before about surrounding yourself with better people. And I have since found myself with better partners that are showing a much better path for that to continue. And then the work with Adventro is very much how I stay connected to the fintech community that built over the last 20 years. And I have a small group of clients that leverage me for the knowledge I have about how and what I've done leading groups and leading teams, and what we talked before about creating the customer experience and the maximum value of that, at the very beginning of that customer experience, in order to keep and retain customers and build revenue, is what I coach and what I help lead teams and companies to do. And those companies are some of them are incredibly small, some of them are much larger. And then I maintain even relationships outside of Adventro to with opportunities that come my way to help people really move the needle based on what my experiences, and then based on how as a team we can work through teams to create growth and change.
Sure. Especially when you're doing some of this coaching and so on and talking about, what are some of the biggest lessons or, advice that, kind of really stick with you and really helped you kind of in your career that maybe you're passing on to some of those clients and as you're coaching them?
One of the more I mean, again, being a lifelong learner, I'd say I came across a great particular book called The Art of Gathering, which showed me tools that I had been using without. It helped organize some things that I was naturally doing about creating experiences, and within those experiences, intentionally moving people to create and connect themselves. That's a little vague, but what I mean is like, I in September of last year, I put together a 500 entrepreneurs from around the world, mostly along the East Coast, but from points all from South Africa to Germany to Hawaii, all came to Atlanta under a theme called perseverance. And I had a co-chair and I had a 20-person committee that spent a year and a half to build this. We had $1 million budget, and we had top name, incredible keynote speakers like Peter Diamandis and a former senator from Arizona, Martha McSally, and others who came to talk about, the under this theme of perseverance, which we defined as the daily commitment to better routines in order to reach a future version of ourselves that's better than where we are right now. And how do we nurture a daily routine of excellence that leads to that future version of ourselves? Atlanta being a fantastic place to tell those stories, because Atlanta is a place that has been burned to the ground and reborn again, and every 10 years has reinvented itself, if you understand the history of the city, and through the lens of civil rights and through the lens of NGOs like the Carter Center and film and art and music, this city is a pretty remarkable place to tell these kinds of stories. Lots of other American cities are equally, fantastic at surviving and going through change. Detroit being, a big one, but Atlanta is a great one. And this conference was all about creating the space for these entrepreneurs to connect and network, but then also to grow and learn. And I'm answering that question, that you've posed in that way, because that's where I gain a lot. It's where I gain a lot of experience about being able to move people through change. It's not just about KPIs and dashboards. You've got to assess the team that's on the field with the ball. And you got to understand, like, is everyone in the best role that they can be in? Is everyone leveraging other people on the team to get done as a group what needs to get done, not individually what's on their own agenda, but collectively. So again, to talk about, do we have a strategic person? Do we have an executioner? Do we have a relator? Do we have a communicator? Are they all working toward the same thing?
Gotcha. One thing that you kind of talked about was kind of daily routines and so on. So I guess this is a good place to start kind of wrapping up is what does your daily routine look like? Certain, habits or characteristics that really kind of help, set you and let you finish the things and do all the things that you want to, whether it's doing the wine stuff, whether it's the coaching and consulting and so on.
Well, it all centers from you, so I'm a big advocate of self-care and wellness. Um, and that means health and mental, as well. So in any given, starting at the month level, I mean, I have starting on the year, I have certain plans. Like we have the vision of myself in the future and how am I going to get there? Well, it means, and so I have a cadence of things that I do with my family, with the clients that I have. But it boils down then to on a monthly basis, where are my monthly meetings that are both peer related, with other entrepreneurs as well as clients and so forth. To get down to the daily level, there is always a component of. I had a friend of mine another CEO who talks about being a gamer. And a gamer means a daily routine practice of waking up and journaling in some way or form, some form of gratitude, and then doing kind of affirmations. Like I'm doing all these activities in my life because I'm the kind of person who values, and those are affirmations. Like I am you know, I am someone who acts from good intentions. I am one who, is empathetic in my relationships. Um, Different than gratitude. Like I am thankful for the sunrise this morning that I happened to catch. It can be big, grandiose. It can sometimes be as detailed and small as, something as I saw a ladybug today. Fantastic. Um, Goodness. Meditation also helps, and that can be in the form of exercise, which is E, so gamer, GA, gratitude, affirmations, meditation, exercise, and rest or reading. Um, but that meditation is also sometimes expressed in like the end of a yoga session, that kind of shavasana, that kind of stillness where things start to clear after you're very present for an hour of, let's say, exercise of yoga. But I will do yoga or Pilates, or I'll even jump on the Peloton. It involves some amount of, get the heart rate up and do something because I'm living for the next version of myself. And then the rest, and it's obviously like even if I can get through one page in a book that's by my bedside, it beats being on the phone, it beats screen time, and that reading leads to rest. And then I pick it up and try to read that page again, or move and get to the next page. But little by little, that book gets done, and and again, just being rested. So. Self-care is where it's at. I'll take a massage where I need to, otherwise, and and do the things that I need to do so that I take time for myself, then I can take time for others.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess perhaps the best way to take care of others is to take care of yourself first, right? Yeah.
This wraps up, right? So my father was in the hospitality industry. That, I love to cook and I love to serve, to me, I mean, lots of the deals, in previous companies have been around a good bottle of wine. After you get past like the economic case for this, that we're solving some pain points, we're doing this. But now, look, here's our uptimes, here's our reliability, but here we are as a team, and here we are as a person. This is who you're going to be doing business with, and let's explore a little bit more of that over dinner, over a nice bottle of wine, and again, the art of gathering, bringing all this in to understand and create space so that we understand each other, is great. It's naturally why I love to cook, and why I also love, like, big moments for me are when I can, you're a special person if you get invited over, to my house and I cook for you.
Sure.
Um, so maybe one day that will happen. And otherwise, we've certainly gone out for dinner when we first met at Benzinga, and subsequently, some of the experiences that we've done on the floor of the NYSE. These kinds of things are experiences that I like to create, whether it's with food or whether it's with
People.
experience in
Yeah.
spaces.
Yeah.
That drives that gets me going.
All right. Last question. For those, whether it's yourself or you're looking at others who have been successful or will be successful, what is kind of like an underrated characteristic among, maybe potentially or already successful founders and operators?
I think you have to have a sense of empathy and humility that you don't have all the answers and that you have to be comfortable relying on others. You've got to be able to be somebody who promises made or promises kept. You've got to be someone of integrity. And if you don't have that, then you're fighting yourself between versions of what you would like to be and versions that you are. And I've seen so many people kind of trip themselves up, fall into gaps that they create between what they know they should do, but they're not doing, and it eats them up.
Yeah. All right. Well, that kind of wraps it up for me. Did you have any like ending remarks or maybe where people can find you best or engage with you?
Yeah, well, find me on LinkedIn for sure. That's always a great spot and to start a conversation. And find me also at avidvines.com and somewhere and get yourself on the list to get access to these amazing organic champagnes that I import. But can find me through Renato and through the next projects that because we're certainly going to be connected,
Yeah.
and uh, and this has been a great experience. So I appreciate the time and the audience.
Yeah. Thank you for your time, David. Seriously.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.